Prestige Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and these are the Commander staples that I will be putting in my Temur decks. And of course, Temur being blue, red, and green. Moving on to the 3 color combinations. I've already done all the monocolors and the 2 color combinations. And once we get to the 3 color combinations, things change a little bit. They get pretty interesting with the cards that you're going to be auto-including in your decks, right? That's what this series is all about. I'm making a Temur deck. Regardless of what that deck is, I'm going to need certain things in my deck, right? I talked about this recently in my 6 things that every Commander deck needs. Ramp and card draw and removal and all those good things. You're going to need all that stuff regardless of what your deck is doing, and depending on the color combinations you're playing, obviously those things are going to change, sometimes drastically. I refer to it as a template, right? For me, this is a template. The cards that I'm going to use every time I put that deck together of that certain color combination. So if I'm putting an Azorius deck together, for example, I'm probably always going to have a Swords to Plowshares, an Offer You Can't Refuse, right? Great removal spell, great counter spell. Those aren't actually Azorius cards, but depending on the color combination I have, those are the options I'm going to choose for those colors. Once you get up to the 3 color combinations, you have a lot less of the actual cards of that color. So for example, in Temur colors, there's only 25 cards in the history of the game of Magic that are actually Temur, that are red, blue, and green, and a lot of those are commanders. So there's not going to be a whole lot of actual Temur staples that you're going to be putting in your decks, right? A couple of suggestions I could make. Temur Ascendancy is a pretty good one, pretty popular in the format. It's an enchantment. It's going to give all your creatures haste, which is always good. Also, whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you get to draw a card. So even if just your commander has a power 4 or greater, might be worth putting this in the deck. You get to draw a card when you play your commander, gives all your creatures haste, seems pretty good. Guided Passage is a Temur card. It's blue, red, and green. It's a sorcery, and I think it's a pretty good include in a commander deck. You're going to reveal the cards in your library. Very interesting wording there. I don't know if there's any other card in the game of Magic that does this, where you're just revealing your entire library to all of the players at the table. That's not particularly good, obviously, because everyone gets to see what's in your deck. But an opponent is going to choose from among them a creature, a land, and a non-creature, non-land card, and you get to put those into your hand. And I think this is a pretty good card, right? You're guaranteed getting 3 cards here. 3 mana, 3 cards is a pretty good rate. You're guaranteed to get a land if you need a land drop. You're guaranteed to get a creature if you need one of those, maybe as a blocker. Where it can be particularly good, though, is first of all, if you maybe only have 1 creature in your deck, you're guaranteed to get that creature, first of all. So there's a little bit of workaround here with that kind of strategy. More so, though, it is a very political card, right? So if my opponent has a really annoying card like a Rhystic Study on the table, I can choose another opponent, because we all want that Rhystic Study off the table. I'll say, hey, give me some stuff that I want, and then also give me a removal spell, and I'll get that Rhystic Study off the table for everyone. So this can be a really interesting politics card in a commander game. I think it's a pretty neat include in a Temur deck. Shaman of the Great Hunt isn't actually a Temur card, but technically it is. The color identity of this card is Temur because it's red, but also has a Simic ability, right? So it is a blue, red, and green card. 4/2 Orc Shaman with haste. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. That's pretty darn good. That works in a lot of decks. Also, though, you can pay 2 and 2 Simic hybrid mana, so 4 mana total, to draw a card for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. And of course, your Shaman of the Great Hunt has a power of 4 or greater, so you're guaranteed to get at least 1 card draw off of it. Pretty good card in certain decks, I think. But other than that, there really isn't any Temur cards that you're going to be putting on a lot of your decks. More what it comes down to is the color combination that you're playing. What are you going to choose each color to do? You have 3 colors to choose from, and which one does which thing best. So for example, you're going to need ramp in your deck. Good thing you got green. That's obviously the best color at doing that. So your green is going to take care of all the ramping for you. Blue and red don't really do that at all. I've said before, I think people probably put too many mana rocks in their green decks. If I'm putting a deck together that has green in it, I'm probably not going to have hardly any mana rocks at all. You really could forego mana rocks entirely and just play land ramp and possibly mana Orcs, because for me, that's a better option. I might put an Arcane Signet in my Temur deck. That's about it. I always think that Land Ramp is a superior option to Mana Rock, so I'm not going to put a lot of Mana Rocks in my Temur deck. I'm only going to put Land Ramp. I got lots to choose from. Of course, you have blue, and the most powerful thing that blue can do in the format is counter spells, so you're going to have access to all those great blue counter spells. But again, we have a combination of colors here, so Counterflux is another great counter spell that can go in your Temur deck. I like to use it a lot. It's an Izzet card, but obviously it fits in Temur, right? So even though blue is obviously the best color at counter spells, because we have the combination of colors here, we can start looking at the Izzet counter spells as well, or maybe the Simic counter spells, so you want to keep that in mind. Removal is where things get really, really interesting. Now again, I would probably put Decimate and Hull Breach in my Temur deck. These are Gruul cards. I would put them in my Gruul deck, but of course we have red and green in our Temur deck, and these are great removal options. A lot of people have shied away from these cards in recent times. I still think they're pretty good. Hull Breach is 2 mana, destroy an artifact and enchantment. That seems like a pretty good rate to me. Decimate, destroy target artifact, creature, enchantment, and land. Now the downside of this card obviously is that you have to have all those targets in play in order to use it. For me though, 4 mana, destroy 4 permanents is an incredibly good rate, and a lot of times if you have one guy that is way ahead on board, you can use this just on that person, blow up 4 of their permanents, their best creature, their best artifact, their best enchantment, and their best land, and it really knocks them back down to where everyone else is at. So I would probably include these in my Temur deck. Of course, for artifact removal, you have Vandal Blast. If I'm playing a red deck in any combinations, I'm going to be putting Vandal Blast in there. It is the best artifact removal spell we have in the entire format. I'm also going to put Bane of Progress in there. This is another card that I'm just going to put in all my green decks unless I have a really good reason not to. Blowing up all the artifacts and enchantments in play is such a massive advantage for you as long as it's not hurting you that much. And then on top of that, you get this giant creature as well. And again, as I say all the time, abilities stapled on creatures are extra good because you can blink them, recur them back from your graveyard and whatnot. Targeted creature removal, honestly, I think blue is probably best here, right? If we're looking at our 3-color combination here, you have to choose the color that does that thing the best in this color combination. And if I'm looking at Temur colors, blue is the best of those 3 colors that is the best at removing creatures in targeted form. So Pongify and Rapid Hybridization are 2 cards that I'm probably going to put in my Temur deck because they are fantastic targeted removal options for you. Beast Within, as I've said before, is probably my favorite removal spell in the entire format. It's going to hit any permanent. So again, if I'm playing a green deck of any combination of colors, I'm going to put Beast Within in there. It's going to deal with anything that is giving us problems. So you're pretty good on the targeted removal here as well. Board wipes is where things get really, really interesting, I think. Now, of course, when you're talking about board wipes in Temur colors, everyone's going to think, okay, well, red obviously does that best. Blue and green aren't great at creature board wipes, right? We're specifically talking about the creature board wipes here. So I have Blasphemous Act, Chain Reaction. Those are really good. Of course, Blasphemous Act being one of the best in the entire format at getting rid of those creatures. Chain Reaction is pretty good, although you are a little bit limited there, right? If there's not a lot of creatures in play, it gets a lot worse. It really trails off after that. I find that the red board wipes, after you get past Blasphemous Act, really start to trail off. And a lot of ones like Starstorm, for example, is one that I go to from time to time. Got to put a lot of mana into it if you want to get those big creatures off the table, right? And of course, green doesn't really do the creature board wipes at all, and blue isn't super great at it either, although Curse of the Swine, I have touted on my channel a lot, is sort of a pseudo board wipe, right? Again, you do have to put quite a bit of mana into it, but for me, this is just a go-to if I'm playing a blue deck. There is very few decks that I'm going to build that are blue where I'm not going to include a Curse of the Swine, because it is sort of a board wipe, but also targeted removal, and also is exiling, which is another thing that Temur colors isn't doing very well. That is one of the things that holds Temur back a bit, is it's not great at exiling, and I really think you do need options in your Temur deck for doing that. One of the things I always think about whenever I'm putting a commander deck together is, if my opponent plays a Blightsteel Colossus or maybe an Avacyn, am I going to be able to deal with it? If I can't, I don't know, maybe I have to go back to the drawing board, because those are popular creatures in the format, and if I can't deal with them, the game's pretty much just over for me, right? Curse of the Swine is going to deal with both of them. It is a really fantastic card where I can only put maybe 1 or 2 mana into it, get the Avacyn off the table, get that Blightsteel Colossus or whatever other really troublesome creature I want off the table, or later in the game, I got a whole bunch of mana, I can put a ton of mana into this and just remove all my opponent's creatures, and mine are perfectly fine. So this can really be a one-sided board wipe sometimes. Fantastic removal spell in the format, I think. The board wipe situation is an interesting one, right? Dealing with those artifacts and enchantments, green and red does it really, really well. That part you should be covered as far as the board wipe options. But the creature one, once you get past Blasphemous Act, it gets a little bit difficult in Temur colors. I've made quite a few Temur decks in my time, and that's the part that I find I have trouble dealing with, is those go wide, creature heavy strategies can be an issue for a Temur deck sometimes. So when you're putting your 3-color decks together, more so what it is about is what does each color do really, really well, right? We have green for ramping. We have, I guess, green and blue for card draw, so that's good. We got those blue counter spells, of course, which are always great. And we got pretty much good removal across the board with regards to all colors, right? If we use the red, the green, and the blue, we're pretty much covered for removal. So not a lot of holes in the Temur game. But for me, if I'm putting a Temur deck together, these are the cards that I am probably going to be including or giving a hard look at the very least, right? I'm going to have this template. I look at it. I go, okay, these are the cards that I probably want to include. But depending on what my deck is doing, I might want to make a few adjustments, right? Make some additions, make some subtractions. You're always going to be wanting to do that based on what you're doing in your commander deck. Maybe I don't want to play a Bane of Progress if I'm playing an enchantment heavy or artifact heavy theme. So you always want to make those adjustments as you build your deck. But that is essentially it. That is the cards that I am including in my Temur decks if I'm putting it together, right? Again, you want to look at the things that you need to do in a commander deck, and then you want to look at what those certain colors that you are playing do well, and which of those colors are going to cover which of those bases, right? Let me know in the comments below what you are going to be auto-including in all your Temur commander decks when you're putting them together. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.